Hey, I'm Eddie Hyatt. This is the Eddie Hyatt Podcast. So glad you joined me today. And, we've been looking in the book of Acts and Acts 11 and showing how the early church, the early Christians were all Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. The early Christians were all practicing Jews. And one of the big things they had to overcome in preaching and fulfilling the Great Commission that Jesus told them to go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, make disciples of all nations. The one big thing they had to overcome was their prejudice, their prejudging of people who weren't like them, the Gentiles. And we looked in the book of Acts. We looked at how Peter had to overcome, and the early leaders there in Jerusalem had to overcome prejudice against Gentiles, and Peter preaching to Cornelius's household. And then yesterday we looked at Paul rebuking Peter publicly because out of fear he resorted to prejudice. And as we were ending, I was thinking of other stories, and I'll just tell one. I was teaching at a Bible school in Canada several years ago, and there was a young man. He was from Africa, a black brother. He was from Africa. I forget which country he was from, but we were talking about revival and about evangelism and so on. And so he was telling me a little story how the Bible school, the students were going to go out on the street for a time of street witnessing. And so he told the Lord that, okay, Lord, I'm going to witness to the first person that comes down this sidewalk. He positioned himself the first person that comes my way. And he looked up, he said, and here came a Muslim woman, totally covered from head to foot, even her face covered. She only had that little opening around her eyes, and his heart dropped, and he said, "Oh no." But anyway, he had made a commitment. He was going to witness to this first person. So what I'm telling you, folks, see, there was a prejudice, and that's easy to have against people who are so very different from us. And so he walks up to this woman and speaks to her. And he said to her, and this is how he decided. I'm not saying this is how you do it, but this is how he decided to approach it. He said he walked up to her and he said to her, did you know that Allah loves you and that he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die for you? And she said, no, I didn't know that. And so and she was very interested. He said, so she said, I invited her to sit down. And he said, I talked to her for over an hour about the gospel and about Jesus Christ. Now I know that we could find problematic with him using the word Allah, but that was his way of opening the door and getting her to listen to him. And for an hour, he shared with her the good news of Jesus Christ, and she listened and was so receptive and wanted to hear. Now, of course, what you run into with Muslims, I mean, Islam is not just a religion. I mean, it is a culture. It is a family thing. It is a political thing, and and someone who is so steeped in it like that, they could be murdered by their family. I mean, we've had teenagers. Two teenage girls was murdered by their father, Muslim father here. They had come to America, and they had decided they didn't want to wear, the head coverings and everything, and they were becoming, you might say, Americanized. And the father wound up murdering them. What terrible bondage. So this brother, he found a way to break through. Now, uh, she didn't make a commitment to Jesus Christ. The fact is, he was able to plant seeds. And when we plant seeds, God will find somebody else to water them. Paul put it like this one time. He said, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. And there are some situations where God may use you to be the one planting the seed. You may not get to see the harvest. You plant the seed. Somebody else may come along and water the seed and causes it to grow. And then somebody else comes along and reaps the harvest. And by the way, when you lead somebody to Christ and it seems like it was so easy, you just know that somebody did some seed planting and watering before you. So don't stick your chest out too far and get too proud of yourself. No, you are a small part of the whole process that God is using and working. And so my friends, for the last several sessions, and it must be important to God because I certainly didn't plan to spend on this. Um, this was one of the very powerful aspects of the gospel in the first century, where there was so much um, ethnic and racial prejudice and wars between different groups. That in the gospel, as Paul put it in Galatians 3:28, he says that in Christ, in Messiah, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female, but you are all one in Christ Jesus. Paul is not saying that these distinctions no longer exist. Yes, they're still there, but they are no longer the basis for giving value to a person. We don't value a person simply. You see, it's prejudice when you value a person or you diminish their value based simply on their race, based simply on whether they're a man or a woman, or based simply on their class, what part of town they live in. The gospel is no. In Christ, in the Messiah, you are all one in Jesus Christ, and this old value system that we used to live by, we no longer value in the church of Jesus Christ. We no longer live by those old value systems that valued a person based on their class, based on how much money they had, what kind of car they drove, based on whether they were a man or a woman, based on whether Jew, Gentile, or whatever the race they may be. But now we are all one in Christ Jesus. What a powerful message that was in the first century, as the disciples took the message of Christ out to the whole world. But as you can see, as we've been seeing, they had to overcome a lot of their own prejudices. And the church around the world is still overcoming prejudices today. I'll just mention this, and you will find a lot about this in my book, uh, uh, Apostolic Leadership. Did you know the Catholic Church today? Now, I've met lots of good Catholics. There are some true Christians among Catholics. I had some great fellowship. But the Catholic Church, um, there is an arrogance and a pride in their doctrine. They believe that they are the only true church. They will not even call a Baptist or a Methodist. They will not call it a church. They will call it a Christian community because the only church is the Roman Catholic Church. And their approach to unity, now listen, when you read about Catholics talking about unity, their vision of unity is when all of these sheep that have gone astray, when they all return to the Catholic Church. But you see, that is prejudice. There is built into the Roman Catholic system a prejudice against other believers. And that needs to be challenged. And I look for ways to challenge it. And I have challenged it in a little book called um, Infallible Pope, Source of Unity, or Key to Unity, or Source of Division. I'll put a link to that on today's podcast of both of those books. But you see, of course, this prejudice can happen among Baptists, among Pentecostals. I mean, there are many different, most groups, they feel like they're just a little notch, a little more holy above everybody else. Friends, the label on your name does not make you acceptable to God more than anybody else. Whether that label is Methodist or Baptist or Catholic or Presbyterian, that label, God doesn't give a rip about our labels. He is looking at our hearts, and we need to get rid of these prejudicial attitudes that we have simply because we belong to a certain church or denomination. Because if we truly belong to Christ, we are all one in Him. And may God bring unity to His people his church around the world. God bless you. I'm Eddie Hyatt. This is the Eddie Hyatt Podcast, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. God bless you.